I'm gonna move some screens around to get myself in. All right. So, um, so during the holidays, the cadence for a lot of fundraising offices, it changes to have to adapt to the fact that the season is peppered with events, with celebrations, with holidays, with end of fiscal year for some folks. Um, and this time of year, it's not easy for our frontline fundraisers to necessarily get the visits or have the calls with their prospects, who all have their own level of being preoccupied by events, celebrations, end of calendar year. Maybe it's even for their business end of fiscal year. Um, when the fundraisers are not going full steam ahead, this gives us a little time to work on our prospect research, our prospect management, our data analytics, and sometimes a little like it just gives us that sort of short reprieve that we need from the usual hustle and bustle pace that we're always going at. I know a lot of frontline frontenders will be like, oh, we have the summers, they're so light. I'm like, not for the research management data people. Like those are the time where we just buckle down. But also right here near the holidays is a good time where we can buckle down and do some things. And we can use this time to catch up on things like old emails, boring, or we can take this time to look forward, sort of taking proactive steps towards positioning our fundraisers and our entire team for success in the new calendar year, which is way more exciting, in my opinion. So, in my experience, these last couple of weeks of the calendar year, it's a great time to pull a lot of data into Excel and really dig into your data. And as you dig in, don't be afraid to do some analysis work. Um, this digging and analysis work, it's going to help you to get a handle on where your team is at with their annual goals and with their portfolios. And I know some folks, your calendar year is your fiscal year, but for those who aren't, like maybe you end in March or in June, it gives you some time to measure where you are in relationship to how close to that goal you are. Um, it, you get to take a look to where things might need to be adjusted or what the current trend looks like towards those goals and find ways to then convey that information to others in your office. You want to be able to share the findings with your team so that they're in a much better position as they kick off the new year. And I didn't mention this at the start, maybe Marianne did before I zipped in, but feel free to ask questions in the chat. And this is meant to be a little bit interactive. So if you're more bold than chat, you can just unmute and interrupt. I'm cool with that. So bear that in mind as we're talking. If we hit on a spot, you're like, I have things to say or ask, absolutely say or ask. Absolutely. So as we look at our prospect lists and we use different key data points, this is just a sample one with really goofy names, not at all real people or real data. We begin to get a better idea as we're looking at this of how we are currently positioned for our next calendar year. This is going to help us gauge where we are in relation to our goals. And we're going to find areas that might need some attention or some adjustments in order to help us stay on track and be successful for our new year. So when you're working with data in Excel, the most basic way to look at it is, we play with sorting and filtering. And you can do sort of those basic sorts, the A to Z, or you can do something a little more customized, a little more fancy, so you can see things in a slightly more tiered way. This can be fun. This is an example of the exact same data we saw 2 slides ago. Custom sorted, which this is a very small sample. It's 28 rows, 8 columns. It's not going to appear vastly different from the original one that I showed you. If you have a couple hundred rows of data, you're going to see a lot more movement when you custom sort. And the custom sorting is really helpful for smaller sets of data, although probably not quite this small because this is just super small for the sake of example. And while I do enjoy myself a good sort and filter to get some quick results, this particular technique, it's only going to get us so far, right? Plus, if we make an error, like when we forget to clear a filter, or if we don't include all the columns in our sort and filter, it's going to mess everything up. Like there is room for human error within your sort and filter, unfortunately. Been there, done that, have the battle scars to prove it. So enter the pivot table. And for those of you who were fans of this particular TV show, you could probably hear this slide right now. I can. My homage to the gentleman who's just passed away. So the pivot table is a super powerful tool that lives within Excel. Highly underrated. You can use it for a lot of things, even if you're not a data analyst. I'll respect Marianne as she is, but for those who aren't big into data analysis, you can still use pivot tables without really knowing all the ins and outs of data analysis because that's what the tool is set up for. It's set up to be fairly simple. It's a little more nuanced than your sort and filter, but it's not so powerful that you're trying to run Power BI, right? Um, and this allows us, using pivot tables, we can get some answers to some pretty important questions. It's going to give us a fast and more interactive way to summarize large amounts of data, and it's going to allow us to view those in aggregate for more specific uses. With the pivot table, we can summarize, we can sort, reorganize, group, count, total, and average the data that's stored in a table. Whereas if you're doing that through sort and filter, you have to sort and filter and then do some extra gymnastics to get to that point. Pivot tables do this work for you. So they are beautiful tools. They don't take a lot to figure out. We do have some experts, Marianne, on the call who can help with those things if you don't know much about pivot tables. So pivot tables help in making important decisions. What are the benefits of it? You're going to help make important decisions based on your data. You're not going to lose any accuracy because it's based on the source data from your Excel workbook. So if you quote unquote miss a column like you might in a sort and filter situation, you're not doing that in a pivot table situation. You've told it exactly which ones to use, and you're not going to miss some data just because you missorted or forgot to clear a filter. You save a lot of time by using pivot tables to report out on your data. It takes a lot of that manual work and math out of the equation for you because you're letting Excel do it for you. By slicing and dicing your data using the pivot tables, you can see some patterns, some trends in the data that help answer your basic questions. And also by looking at, hundreds or thousands of rows of data, if you're just looking at that in Excel, it's going to be really hard to see what you need. But the pivot table, again, it's going to summarize portions of the data into easy to read, easy digestible, bite-sized pieces that you can work with immediately. Pivot tables let you handle volumes of data so you can show information and quantitative results in a very straightforward manner to those who you report to. So it's not just for you. You can run a pivot table, then just show it right to your supervisor or someone in leadership, and they can pretty much understand what they're looking at. It doesn't require a lot of interpretation necessarily. And if you're adept in Excel, you can breeze your way through a sort and filter project. Learning how to use pivot tables is not a heavy lift. They're easy to use. They can be very finessed and nuanced the more you get the swing of things. But just to run a basic pivot table, not too hard for most folks. And you're all very smart people on the call, so I know you can all figure this out quite easily. So here are some pivot tables. They all came from that same sample data that we were looking at earlier. Based on how we choose to build our pivot table, we can look at this exact same data. So all four of these are based on the exact same data, and we're looking at it different ways to give us a more comprehensive view of what's going on with these portfolios. So looking at the same information through a slightly different lens allows us to see where things are going well and where they're on track versus where things might be imbalanced or need of some attention. So for example, in these ones that we're looking at right here on the screen, and I apologize if you're looking on like a super small laptop screen, some of these numbers might be different, but I'll walk you through it. So if you're looking at the pivot on the bottom right-hand corner, the one that's total solicitation amount for each program area this fiscal year, if we're looking at that one, it shows the total dollar value of solicitations for each program area for the remainder of your fiscal year, fictitious fiscal year here. We can see in this instance that athletics is getting the lion's share of those solicitation dollars. It's 42% if you were to do the math. If we know we need to raise more dollars for, say, scholarship this year, this is a good way to check and be like, oh, we're really underperforming in raising money for scholarship. We're knocking out of the park for athletics. So let's see what we can do for the next fiscal year. For the rest of the fiscal year, who can we target that might want to give more towards scholarship, right? In our bottom left pivot table, we're looking at that number of solicitations per month, and it seems relatively well balanced. but the dollar amount being solicited varies greatly. So the count, the number of solicitations happening, pretty even per month, but the amount of dollars, a little out of whack, perhaps. And in that same pivot table, if you do the math, 34% of those dollars we're going to be soliciting in June, the 2.825 million in that example. So do we really want to count on the fact that we're asking for 34% of our revenue to come in that last month of the year? Or can we accelerate some of those asks? Because May's looking a little light. February could use some help. Can we accelerate some of these asks to be a little earlier so that we're not, up until the 11th hour waiting for those things to happen? So, and likewise, if we look in our, just going over some more of these pivots, if we look in the upper left-hand pivot, solicitation totals this fiscal year per gift officer, we can see that Curtis Mayfield, again, if you do the math, he's responsible for 39% of the solicited dollars, 3.2 million. That's 39% of that 8.2. Now, if he's the most seasoned gift officer, or if he carries the highest value portfolio, that might make sense. But if he's not the most seasoned, or he doesn't have the highest value portfolio, we're going to want to explore what's going on with why he has so many solicitations scheduled between now and the end of the fiscal year.
Sorry, Ruthie?
Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that I can do in a pivot table is set it so that it shows me the percentage of the grand total.
Ah, I was lazy.
Yep. So it can do the math.
It can do the math.
Of course you knew that.
Yeah. But yeah, as we're looking at these start to bring up questions, as they should. I thought I heard someone come in.
That was me.
Oh,
Greg. Sorry, this is, you can probably sound why I don't have my camera on. I was also going to say you can do a running total for the bottom right-hand corner to see what percentage you've raised going into the last month. Exactly. We're trying to raise the last month.
Exactly. Yeah, like again, Greg and Marianne are much more finesse at this than me. I did some real rough ones just for the sake of example here, but they know all the ways, like you could do this 10 times better.
So that's why I have my obvious sales ploy links in the chat for Greg's classes.
Yeah. So just running a couple of these pivots, we can see where there are some voids, where things need some attention, what questions come to mind. Is Curtis Mayfield really our most seasoned gift officer or not? Should he be carrying the lion's share of solicitations for the rest of the fiscal year? All those questions can come to mind as we're looking at just some basic data that I think this may have taken me 10 minutes to put all these together, including adding them to the slide. It's not long. All right. And just for those of you who are curious, the True Data nerds, yes, Curtis has the highest portfolio value from that group that we just saw. So I was saying if he has the most value in his portfolio, maybe he should have the most asks. Yeah, he does. But we still don't know solely based on this data if he's the most seasoned gift officer. Maybe we just, set up our newest, most unseasoned gift officer for some very challenging stuff. So we're still going to want to explore more than just this information to figure out what's going on. So questions, thoughts, concerns? Does anyone need to go back to some of those pivot table things? It's a lot of information at once in the speed demon version that I do.
If your executives don't like seeing tables full of numbers, you can use a pivot chart to create charts as well. It's in the same area as the pivot table. Just to remember.
Yeah. Again, loads of nuances to this when you go in deeper and to make it prettier for your executives, as Greg's saying. Right. So let me move on. So now that we might be feeling a bit more like the world of pivot tables is well within our reach, how would you want to look at the data in order to help with prospect management? And we're going to start with the goals. Like those are the main drivers that leadership has their eye on, right? That fiscal goals typically are The big one is always the dollar goal. Sometimes the goal is number of visits, whatever it may be. But we want to look at those goals and use those for the things that we really want to pay attention to. And there are a number of ways you can look at your data in order to help with prospect management based on those goals. You might want to make sure that the portfolios are well balanced, creating some equity between your gift officers. And I don't mean every gift officer has the same number of prospects. I mean, every gift officer is set up for success based on who they are, how well seasoned they are, and the value of their portfolio. So if, back in our example, if Curtis Mayfield, if he really did have cheated, let me slide back. So in Curtis's case, he really does have a very wealthy portfolio compared to some of the others. If he is our most seasoned gift officer, this is great. But if Sam Cook is our most seasoned gift officer, we might want to think about giving him a few more prospects who have a higher value to really maximize the use of that individual. Likewise, if Etta James is not very well seasoned, we may want to move some of her people, say to Nancy Wilson or to Sam Cook, to even it out, to give Etta some chance of actually being successful in hitting her numbers for the year. Makes some sense, hopefully. So creating equity is not the same as everything being equal. We want things to match who the gift officer is, the value of the portfolio, and how well seasoned they are, and also how new they are to your organization. Right? Someone who's been there 5 years really knows their portfolio. Someone who's been there 5 weeks, give them a chance. Cut them a little slack and set them up for success. Other things that we want to be doing as we're looking for stuff in our data, we want to look at the pipeline to get a feel for the overall health of the current pipeline. If there's a few areas that seem either sort of more anemic or more bloated, maybe we have a lot of people in cultivation, but hardly anyone in solicitation, who can we start moving? So we want to make sure that we're moving people along and we have a good balance of people and the pipeline is healthy. So you can course correct for that if you're looking at the information based on the donor cycle stage that someone's in. As you dive into your data, you're also going to be seeing some areas of challenge, or maybe there's a particular fundraiser that looks to be struggling. And if so, you want to think about ways that you can help from a prospect management perspective. So if you see areas where things are going really well, you might want to dive into those and see what's the source of the success. And then can we replicate that success elsewhere or with another gift officer or with another program? Also, as you're diving into your data, you might find some things that are missing or wrong or just don't quite line up. And that is a great opportunity for you to reach out to the individual fundraiser to get that data corrected or complete so that the year-end reporting is going to be accurate. Because you're going to start pulling reports in January to report on, calendar year-end stuff. You want them to be right. So take a look at the data and make sure everything looks to be in order so that it can be reported out correctly. And give your gift officers that polite and courteous heads up saying, this looks a little askew. Can we talk about this so I can get this right so that the reports reflect exactly where you are with all of your stuff? They will appreciate that. Once you've taken a good hard look at your data, diving in deep and finding those things that we just talked about, how do you start communicating the findings out? Who do you tell? Because it can be exciting. I get excited when you start finding all this stuff in the data and you just want to tell someone about it. But there needs to be a plan. Don't get ahead of yourself. No cart before the horse action here. There needs to be a plan for who to go to and when to go to them about various things. And I'm not suggesting that you keep secrets or you're not transparent, but you have to roll this out in a certain way so that you're not doing anything prematurely. You don't just run straight to your president or head of your office or chief, whatever officer they're called in your place, with things saying so-and-so's information doesn't look right, right? This is not tattletale moments. This is making sure that we are reporting things out correctly. You are working as a team, so be kind to your teammates. If you are going to be presenting leadership with any issues, you also want to make sure you have solutions for those issues, or at least some suggestions for how to solve for those issues. So don't just tell them there's a problem. Tell them what you think you might want to do. So some examples of things we want to communicate. You might not want to go straight to leadership about that missing data. That should be that one-on-one conversation with your fundraiser. Give them a moment. Maybe they were out sick. And a lot of people, I think at Thanksgiving time, we've gathered in groups and now everyone's got the flu or whatever this thing is that's going around in the Northeast. A lot of people are sick in the Northeast right now, it seems, people I keep running into. So give them a chance to correct the data before you go running to the top of the org chart with it. You want to make sure you get it in there. They're going to appreciate that you give them a moment to get that data correct. And the head of your office doesn't need you running off as a tattletale. That they don't care about that. That's wasting their time, and it doesn't put you in a good light. And you're not positioning yourself as anyone's partner that way. So make sure you have those one-on-one conversations with the fundraiser to get their information in order. Other things, you might want to figure out where those areas of success are. Dig in a little. See if some of those can be replicated, come up with a strategy, and then go to the head of your fundraisers and or the head of your fundraising department, whoever is appropriate, depends on size of departments and all that, and your communication and your culture. But go to the person who might be willing to listen and say, I see that this is happening. I see that, I see that Chris is doing really well with these kind of prospects for this kind of thing. So let's see if Chris can share some of their tactics and strategies with other gift officers, and see if that's a conversation that can be had. You do need to communicate your vital findings to those leadership and those who are directly impacted. Just be thoughtful about what you're going to say, how you say it, and when you say it, because you still have to tell them all the stuff. But be thoughtful, be mindful. This is your team. You are working together towards the same goals, towards the same mission, right? So don't chuck anyone under the bus just because you found something out. Because I've worked in those offices. I'm sure some of you have as well. And it is not, it doesn't feel good. So just remember, as prospect management, you are their thought partner, you are their problem solver, you are their strategic and tactical advisor. So approach your communications with everyone in your office from that vein. And then know your audience. I mean, I love me a good spreadsheet, but often the head of fundraising or manager, the gift officers, she doesn't have time to look at 10,000 rows of data, 87 columns wide. She's not interested. Some people do like to get into the weeds with all the data and the stats, but and there are some of those fundraisers who claim they love data or that they're data driven, but their interpretation of what that means differs from what we mean as prospect management. Like when we hear that, we're like, oh, data and analysis and spreadsheets, oh my. And what they mean is something a little more digestible with a pretty chart that still is based on data, but it's easier for them to then translate that to something actionable. So show them the information through their lens, not yours. Give them something that is easy to digest in bite-sized pieces, and it easily conveys the punchline. Like, what are you trying to get at by showing me this information? Because showing them lots of information just because you can, showing them information that you can say, and this is actionable, or this is result, or this is something we have to work on, that's important. So get to your punchline quickly. Sorry if you hear noise behind me. I have 3 cats fighting suddenly. Always some sort of a nonsense happening in my room. Right. Bring out the party. All right. So that is the end of my big long spiel about these kinds of things, but happy to go back to other slides and discuss things. Happy to hear what's going on in your office. Maybe we as a group together can help solve some stuff. We are a smart, very talented group here today. So any and all questions, and let me go find the chat so I can see if there's anything in there.
So feel free to unmute and start sharing a story, or feel free to put it in chat, or feel free to privately chat someone else to ask for you if you're worried that there's any political sensitivity. I myself would love to go back to that hot chocolate slide. Did you see all the marshmallows in that hot chocolate? Oh my. But I'll probably put on a pound just looking at it. Yeah.
That's the one.
Yep.
Yeah, that's my kind of hot chocolate.
So how are you all working through your season right now? Are you just enjoying holiday parties, or are you thinking about how much everybody's gonna panic in January?
I think lunchtime food coma is kicking in.
Well, people need a couple minutes to get to their keyboard, set down their lunch, get to their keyboard, or figure out where the unmute button is.
Or the flu has spread from the Northeast to wherever people are, for example, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so. Yeah.
It's at my CrossFit gym in Alabama.
Oh, not good, not good.
Questions or comments right now?
I have a question. Hi, this is Candace. I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio. So I work at the University of Cincinnati, and we've been using pivot tables in our monthly check-ins with the fundraisers to highlight kind of their upcoming asks and their upcoming closes. We've highlighted recently closed gifts. So, is there any stewardship that we need to kind of touch base on? And we've highlighted unqualified assignments. So we do assign prospects that have not yet been qualified to a specific fundraiser for a period of about 6 months to give them time to try and attempt and qualify them. And so we do try to highlight those names in a pivot table, so we can kind of be checking in, like, how is it going? Have they been responsive? Do we need to check in on alternate contact information? Those types of things. I'm curious if y'all have any ideas or thoughts. I think the longer that we've kind of sat with this format, it continues to grow. So we just keep adding more and more pivot tables, which, I love providing, all those additional details. But I think at the end of the day, like, how do I also not overwhelm the fundraiser, with all of that information or those insights? So if you have any ideas about how to consolidate, or, we've tried to even prioritize, putting kind of the pivot tables that, have things that we want to kind of hit or make sure that we get to first. We kind of put those at the top and kind of let some of the ones fall to the bottom if we don't think we need to hit on those that month. If we don't get to those that month, it's okay. But how do we, I guess, either consolidate or maybe reconsider formatting so we're not totally overwhelming and this thing isn't just continuing to grow and this into a beast?
Are your meetings that you're using these tools with, are they weekly, monthly, quarterly? How often are they happening? I know you might have said, but I missed that thread.
No,
piece
that's
of the thread.
okay. Yeah, we do meet monthly with the
Okay.
teams. Yeah, so monthly.
All right. So what you might want to think about, if it works for your team, is looking at slightly different things in different months. So, for example, if we are talking fiscal year end, you might want to 2 or 3 months prior to that look at and really focus on what solicitations are in the pipeline to be closing soon and what asks are about to be happening. Because you want to close out the year nicely, but you also want to set the new year up, like the new fiscal year up, with some asks already on the table. So you already have some monies coming in within that first couple months of your next fiscal year. So looking to set up your fiscal year end and your next fiscal year beginning, do that maybe 2, 3, sometimes even 4, depends on your organization, a few months prior to the end of the fiscal year. Don't do it in June if you end in June. Do it in like March, right? Other things you can do is, depending on, again, your team and how your organization culture feels, you may have different things you show to different people. So maybe one person really focuses more on the stewardship side of the house. Show them things more about stewardship. Who's in stewardship? How long have they been there? Can we move them back into cultivation? Should they be more into a permanent stewardship situation where we're thanking them for the generosity, but we know that there's nothing really else big coming, unless there's an estate gift, of course, during their lifetime, nothing else big coming. So gearing them up like that. You also, depending on size of office, and this opens up a can of worms, ask them what they want. Now, if you have a really big office, if you're like 80 fundraisers, asking them what they want, you're going to get 80 different answers. If you're a smaller office and you have 5 fundraisers, you're going to get a smaller number, but say, which of these tables are helpful to you? Which of them aren't? What am I not showing you that you would love to see? And
Yeah,
it
that's where my
does.
thinking is going, Ruthie,
Yeah.
is that if I was showing a whole lot of, and it kept getting bigger, I would count. I would put a little tick mark next to the stuff that they comment on, the sections that they comment on, or the sections they ask questions about.
Mhm.
And so sort of like use it as, that's how a beehive does it, right? The ones that all the bees get excited about are the ones that stay, and then the other ones sort of fade off.
Exactly.
Also, I would recommend, instead of necessarily asking every single one of your development officers what they're getting and what they're not getting out of the pivot tables, kind of think about the people who are really engaged in the meetings and who are really taking a lot out of the meetings, and only ask them, you know, not try to make it too obvious that you're asking them because you feel they're more engaged, but what are the engaged gift officers getting out of your meetings and what you're showing them?
This is so helpful. I really, really appreciate that. And I'm just thinking about even the timing. I think that's absolutely right, Ruth. Like the timing of some of these tables, you know, maybe it makes more sense to be revisiting, especially some of the cleanup tiles we have on there. Like some of that really doesn't have to be hit every month, and we don't really get to them every month. They're just kind of hanging out at the bottom of that Excel document that we kind of pull together. So it would save us a lot of time too. So
Yeah, also you want to avoid hijacking, right? So if somebody gets stuck on a detail and always wants to argue about that one little picky detail that doesn't get to the core meaning of the meeting, then that detail has to get hidden.
Yeah.
no true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I found that when I show, this doesn't always happen, but it happens a lot. When you show them a list of names, it becomes story time and they can start telling you stories about each name on the list, like from top to bottom. When you show them a very small, like don't show them the whole list. Show them just the top 3 or 5 names. It keeps story time shorter, and it keeps them much more focused on things. It's okay for them to have some story time. These are frontline fundraisers. They've developed relationships. They're very excited about the work they do, we would hope, and they are engaged with these people. So of course they're going to have stories. That's the nature of who they are and the work that they do. But in prospect management meetings, when you're showing them lists and stuff, you want to make sure you keep them small and condensed so you focus on the purpose of the meeting. And the stories can come later. The stories are fine. I have no problem with the stories, just sometimes not in those meetings. So when you show them lists of names, be cautious how big the list is, because they will get bogged down in that because it's who they are, not because they're trying to be mean about your meeting or they're trying to, you know, trying to take you off topic, but be cautious when you show them lists of names.
That makes sense. The only other quick question I had was about either a pivot table or something I feel like I've been hearing more and more about. I think you alluded to it on one of your previous slides too, Ruth, was about kind of this percent of wallet idea. So trying to tap into, are we kind of missing opportunity? Are we leaving money on the table, so to speak? Like, are we engaging the full potential of our prospects and the value of our portfolios? And so I don't know if maybe it was on your previous slide and I just need to go back after this session, but if there's ways to highlight that. Yeah, this one. Yep.
Yeah. So and you're talking probably about that one in the top left.
Yeah, was it top left or top right? Something about either kind of combining, is it maybe combining something like the
Oh, Ruthie, I
ads?
think it's your next slide where you add portfolio value.
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was too lazy to do that in the other slides.
Would
The pivot tables.
have made
But
them
yeah,
worse, too.
yeah. I mean, and if you know, like say in this example, if Curtis Mayfield is responsible for raising $10 million this year, that's almost the entire value of his portfolio. If he's responsible for raising 2 million, he may not be doing quite enough, right? So looking at those things as well when you're talking about, you know, running through some pivot tables, making sure there's some equity across the board, and also just making sure you're maximizing, like, how much can they realistically raise? Like, he's not going to raise, his portfolio value is 14.7 million. He's not raising that this year, right? That's just, there's no way he could repeat that year after year. It would be asking far too much of any one person to raise the true value of their portfolio year after year. But what percentage can he raise this year? And is that in line with what percentage of this raised the years before? You know, based on the value of his portfolio. And again, is he a seasoned gift officer? Is he brand new? Does he really know this portfolio? Is he seasoned here at your organization, or is he seasoned simply in the field? These are all factors to take into account as to setting the goals, which sometimes we're not invited to that table to set the annual goals. The project management, we should be. We should be invited to that table. We're not always yet, but someday we will be. So talk about that in these meetings, and they'll start to see you in that light as well. And they're like, oh, you know, she has some insight. Maybe we should be inviting Candace to the goal setting meeting, or at least asking her for some information to help inform that a little bit more accurately. Not that they're inaccurate, just you could be a little bit more laser focused based rather than scattershot.
Mhm.
So we
This
have
is
some
helpful.
stuff in the
Thank
chat.
you.
Oh, you're welcome. We have some stuff in the chat. Sorry, Ruth, I answered for you.
Oh, no,
Um,
that's fine.
Haley says we're on a fiscal year, so end of calendar year is a good opportunity to solicit because of taxes, but there's no reason to panic.
Ah, I love it when you don't have to panic.
Yeah. I have to say, I still, even when I was on fiscal, a July fiscal year, I still had gift officers come back from their holiday break thinking of lots of things for my team to do. So maybe that wasn't panic, but it was certainly things kicked right back up after the New Year break. Marlene says, we are busy. We'll be gearing up for a new campaign, and she loves pivot tables and uses them often. So do I, Marlene. Yeah. And then Lauren wants to know, do you have further advice on the structure and content of portfolio review meetings with fundraisers? She's
yes.
new to this.
I have a whole tirade about that, but I will be short.
You have a 2-day course on that.
Too. But the short version is when you're doing, so there's portfolio review. And I'm going to tell you to call them portfolio strategy. We're not reviewing the portfolio because that would just be like, yeah, they're in your portfolio. We've reviewed it. We've looked, they're there. No, we're not reviewing. We're creating a strategy for the portfolio. So, and this is industry wide. We're trying to change this language because we got to get it right. We are strategy people as project management. So we are going to come in there and we are going to create a strategy for their portfolio so that they can hit their goals during their fiscal year, whichever organization you are, whatever your fiscal year runs on, right? And as we're looking at the portfolio as a whole, keep in mind the goals both for the individual fundraiser and the office as a whole. Because if an individual fundraiser blows their goal out of the water, maybe they get some really great bequest or someone, what's her name? The woman who's been giving away all the money, Mackenzie Scott. Like if someone like that shows up in your world and just plunks in a boatload of money, I think is a technical term and the polite term, it's going to blow somebody's numbers out of the water. So then how do we make sure that the rest of the team continues on success and it doesn't sit back on their laurels and is like, well, we raised our 50 million because Mackenzie's awesome. Okay, but we still have other prospects. So making sure that the entire portfolio is moving along to hit the goals and possibly exceed them, right? And if one fundraiser has tremendous success, let's make sure the other ones at least hit their goals, right? So we want to be doing that. Nice comment. Mackenzie says Mackenzie's are awesome. And then we have a prospect strategy meeting, which is a slightly different meeting where you talk about the individual prospects. This is where you get into the list of names and you want a short list on a big list. So in the portfolio review meeting, we're looking at stuff in aggregate. So we're looking at information more like this, right? We're going to look at it in an aggregate. We're going to be looking at things summed up, summarized, bite-sized pieces, and focus on things. So are we focused on, we need to bring in more money for scholarships? Are we focused on balancing the portfolios? Are we focused on, we need to make sure that our solicitations are balanced throughout the year so that we're not asking for 30, whatever I said, percentage of money in June. So looking at that in aggregate for your portfolio strategy meetings. Prospect strategy meetings, you're just talking about your prospects. A couple of names, creating a strategy, working together as sort of a hive mind in the room of key players who can contribute to that conversation. So you're going to have 2 meetings. How's that? Yeah. How's that, Lauren? Feeling good about this? We're going to go back to our office, start renaming meetings.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thanks.
You're welcome. All right.
Does anybody here on the chat get the message you have to make the gift officers something? Or do you all feel like your job is to be partners, to be advisors? I know I'm asking a loaded question.
I hear that our prospect discovery and development office should be telling the gift officers who to visit and when to visit them and what to ask for.
Yes, yes, they should.
You hear that as happening, Deirdre, or you hear that from this webinar?
I hear that from my colleagues of
Oh, yes.
what we'd like to see happening. Some, yeah, I think it happens at various degrees.
Okay. So your team, the member of that team, did come to attend Ruthie's 2-day in-person course on prospect development. So I hope that process has started. And yes, I'm using this comment as a way of selling that too. This is my job.
That colleague also gave a recap at our like division-wide, like quarterly retreat where we also like have people reporting out on conferences. So I could also tell it was a worthwhile
Oh,
conference. So thank you, Ruthie.
thank you for going along with my sales pitch.
No problem.
That's
I could have kept my mouth shut. I didn't have to say that.
Very nice.
Yeah, but there's a power play of sorts. And the reality is most people who work in project management aren't power people. We don't necessarily, we're not there to elevate to the VP level of the op. We don't want to run the office. It's not our thing necessarily. There's a few, but mostly project management people are there because we want to assist the gift officers to be successful for the better of the organization in service to the mission of the organization. That's why we show up. That's what we're doing every day. So when we come to the table and we say, here's who you need to ask, here's how much you need to ask, here's when you need to ask, and here's what you need to ask for. And I've experienced this personally. Someone who oversees the gift officers might be threatened by that behavior because they feel like that's my job, not your job.
That's not true in Deirdre's shop, though.
No, but there may be people here today who are
maybe, yes.
who may have that happening or may predict that could happen if they were to do this. What you would need to do is talk to the person who heads that team and explain to them, you don't want their job. You're not trying to take away the power. You're trying to clear some stuff off of their plate so they can actually work on other things that are far more important than the strategy of the who, the when, the where they're at. Like they can actually sit with them and talk with them about who to visit, when to visit, who to bring in, which relationships to leverage, right? There's other things that they can be working with them as the person who oversees that team. As project management, this idea is very new in the industry. And so some people aren't yet seeing us in that light. So you will be smashing your head against a wall for a while until you bust through it. But go straight through like the Kool-Aid man as best you can and smash through that wall when the wall finally weakens, and it will, but it will take a while. Because I've been at this stuff for a couple of decades and I still bump into that wall quite often in different organizations. So just be aware that like what Deirdre's talking about is unique and amazing, and what other offices are experiencing is probably more typical, but we will be moving towards what her office model is doing. So kudos to Deidre and everyone else. We can dream to be her one day because we will. Oh,
You're being overly kind. I didn't comment on our success.
The success takes time and
intention
change is hard.
Success. Yeah. Intention leads to success. You have to start with intention.
Yes, and change.
So we have a couple of comments here. We're not true partner yet, not really seen as advisors. And the question from Lauren is, the fundraising senior staff make the decisions, ? And my answer to Lauren is yes. The people who supervise the gift officers are the ones who set the expectations for gift officer performance. It's informed by the work that we do in both in research and development. What do you think, Ruthie?
Yeah, I think ultimately they oversee that team. They know things from a frontline fundraiser perspective that we may not from a project management, not frontline perspective. So they do need to make the ultimate decisions, but we're going to arm them with as much information possible, with as much strategy and tactical information as that we can, so that they can make the best informed decision for their staff and for their individual fundraisers as possible. We are going to set them up for success. There's some sports thing, tee up the ball. I'm not a sports ball person, but we're setting them up to then just nail it with their team. So we, if this was war, we're the ones who sit there with the general and say, this is exactly how the battle should go. And then the general decides and then goes out and does the battle, right? And directs it, but we tell them how to do it. So that's where we're trying to position ourselves as project management, and rightly so, where we should be positioned, but some offices aren't yet ready for that. So we need to slowly and gently keep bumping into that wall until we, again, hey, Kool-Aid straight through the thing. Does anyone else remember the Kool-Aid Man? Gen Xers do. My people. Marianne does.
I was in the 7th grade when he came out.
Were you? I can't remember. I was a little younger than that, I guess.
Yeah, you're younger than me.
I remember him smashing through the wall, and of course, all small children tried to do that, much to their parents' chagrin, for a short period of time. Just small children running towards walls, like, it's not going to work. Again, the Gen X,
I
the
love
Gen X
children.
child experience, very, very interesting.
Marlene
so-
remembers him. And the $6 million man who had kids sticking their foot out of the car to stop the car.
Oh my God, yeah.
I think that was younger. That one might be a little out of scope, out of time for you.
No, I love Steve Austin.
Okay.
Oh. All right.
How's everybody feeling? So we've got some empathetic comments, and we're all going to go play on pivot tables. And I did my job trying to sell you things. And I want that hot chocolate, and I want to live in that big red house. But I feel bad for the person who had to hang that wreath up there.
Oh, I know. So if there's anyone who would like to talk more in depth, certainly, you can. We are available for that. I specifically am available for that, as well
Ruthie
as
is available
Marianne
for
and Greg.
coaching hours. Yep.
Yep. So feel free to
And
reach
so is
out.
Greg. Although I think,
Yep.
given Greg's voice, I would give him this week off.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, but speak with whoever you need to get authorization. You're always welcome to reach out to us at any time for these coaching hours. And then a little happy holidays to everyone if we're.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anybody know what day we are in Hanukkah? Is it 5 or 6?
When did it start? Was it Thursday?
My Facebook friends are keeping me up to date with the lit candles.
I think we are
Can you
5.
show the email again, please? I'm sorry, Candace?
I was just saying, I think we are day 5 in Hanukkah.
Green Day 5.
Thank you. Yeah. As someone who grew up in the Christian tradition, I'm jealous of religions where you get to have 2 New Years. My friends from China and my Jewish friends, they get to have 2 New Years. And then my Jewish friends get to have 8 gifts in December. But,
It's still different.
that's my efficiency profit self thinking. Happy holidays, everybody. Thank you for the holiday wishes.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Thank
Thanks,
you,
Candace.
Marianne and
See you
Greg.
all next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.